Thanks for joining us as we discuss the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, accused in the death of George Floyd. I'm Mike Duffy. Our guests tonight are Adante Pointer, a civil rights attorney who has represented dozens of families in police brutality cases, and Sam Starks, executive director of MLK 365, a Sacramento-based civic engagement organization. Thanks for both of you to being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Well, let's start with the first witness of the day, a mixed martial arts fighter named Donald Wilson. The prosecution had sort of used him as an expert witness on chokeholds, but he was also a witness at the scene yelling at Chauvin to get off George Floyd. This is an exchange Wilson had today with Chauvin's defense attorney, and you'll see him keep looking over at Chauvin in court.
You called him a tough guy.
I did.
You called him a real man.
I did.
You called him such a man.
I did.
You called him bogus.
I did.
You called him a bum at least 13 times.
That's what you counted in the video?
That's what I counted.
And that's what you got, 13.
So I'd like to start with you, Mr. Pointer. What did you make of that exchange, and what did you think of Donald Wilson's testimony in general?
Well, I think Donald Wilson's testimony was very compelling. I mean, he didn't choose to be there on the scene. He didn't have any role in this situation developing. He was in shock and expected more of the officer, as I think most people would. And when he saw that the pleas were going ignored, and that this was more of an opportunity to inflict pain and suffering upon someone, his respect left, and it turned into him essentially calling the officer out for what he thought was a gross abuse of his power. I think that resonated with the jury, and I understand the defense tactic was to play up all of the bad words and the impolite sayings that Mr. Wilson used during the course of the video. But, I don't think that mitigated the testimony. I think the testimony still was very difficult for Chauvin to have to deal with in terms of the significance of what he said and saw.
And all of the witnesses really painted it as a very emotional scene. Mr. Starks, how do you think things went in court today?
Well, I thought it was. I thought they went well. You have the prosecutors getting all those videos into evidence, and it was really compelling. Pulled on your heartstrings to have to see that over and again. And I'm not sure if there's more videos to get into evidence. Maybe Adante can share a little bit about that, but it was certainly compelling. And one of the things that, one of the lines from that I will remember from the witness you just referred to Dante about was, he said, "I'm going to call the police on the police." And to me, that was for me the line of the day. When who else do you turn to, right? Yeah. And I'm going to call the police on the police.
We heard that conflict from a number of witnesses, actually. We also had a number of witnesses take the stand today who were there at the scene when George Floyd died last May, and many, including the young woman that we're about to hear from, expressed how traumatizing all this was. Now, she was underage at the time, so you won't see her face.
When I look at George Floyd, I look at my dad, I look at my brothers, I look at my cousins, my uncles, because they are all black. I have a black father, I have a black brother, I have black friends. And I look at that and I look at how that could have been one of them. It's been nights. I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and not physically interacting and not saving his life.
Oh, it's hard to hear. Mr. Starks, what do you think of when you see something like that, hear something like that, and how big of a role does that video of George Floyd's final moments play in this trial?
Well, it should play. It should play a key role. It should be the fait accompli. But we're at a time when don't believe your lying eyes. we've seen this before. We've been to this dance. We've watched this movie. We remember Rodney King and one of the first videos. And yet the justice system couldn't, find it within themselves to validate that life. And so who is to say? Would I be surprised? No. Am I hoping that things have changed since Rodney King? Yes. Yes.
Well, Mr. Pointer, I know that it's kind of premature to even think about these things, but who really has the stronger case at this point in time?
Right now, the prosecution is clearly ahead. They have lapped the defense attorney's case right now, and I think the defense is behind. Right now, the prosecution is in the pole position, as they should be. They're putting on their case right now, and if they're not ahead, then that spells trouble for actually returning a conviction, because they should be ahead. I would just say that with the weight of the testimony, the credibility of these witnesses, and the way in which the prosecution, through these witnesses, are bringing in essentially the trauma and the legacy that police misconduct has brought against the Black community. I mean, if you listen to that young lady's voice tremble, the guilt, the trauma that was authentic and genuine when she says she thinks about the people she loves and what could happen to them and what she wished she could have done, that's why this is such a big issue. And it goes beyond the four corners of this one case. This is a societal issue. And I know the defense attorney said this isn't a social cause in the courtroom, but bingo, here it is. That's the elephant in the room.
Well, that really reminds me, Mr. Starks, you and I were talking earlier, and you said that you're not quite sure that the Black community, other communities are watching these court proceedings in the same way. What were you telling me about that?
Well, I mean, people are going to bring in, when you think about the what baggage, what our own histories, our own experiences. And, yes, we're looking at a set of facts, but we cannot be so without understanding to think that people from various groups and cultures with various experiences are going to look at those facts based on their own experiences. And some of those facts will color what they see. And so when you think that, there's a officer hitting someone, someone might see, based on their experiences, might see that as the police feeling threatened and defending him or herself. And so it really becomes a kind of psychological game, and I'm sure we're not through, you're going to see some of those appeals to culture, anything to get your person off. But I referred to Adante. He may have a different view on that.
Adante?
It's so disappointing when, it's my belief, if this was in reverse, where you saw Mr. Floyd with his knee on an officer's neck or on a white man's neck, it would be a foregone conclusion that a conviction was on the way and prison time, heavy prison time, was sure to follow. I think that if you're on the side of justice and fairness and fair-minded people looking at this, this should not be a close call. This should not be down to the wire. The issue is, as Mr. Starks mentioned, it's the baggage, it's the bias, and it's the belief or disbelief, if you will, that a Black person's life means something in this context, to where an officer must be held accountable for what he did. For persons who are unwilling to accept that a police officer can be held accountable, then they'll find any and every excuse to excuse away this conduct.
Well, Mr. Pointer, I definitely want to come back to that in a second. But first, I want to talk about the last witness of the day today. She'll actually be back tomorrow. Her name is Genevieve Hansen. She got pretty emotional on the stand today. She's a Minneapolis firefighter who just happened to be walking by last May when she saw Mr. Floyd under the knee of Officer Derek Chauvin. She tried to intervene to get the police to check Floyd's pulse. Let's listen.
In my memory, I offered to walk them through it or told them, if he doesn't have a pulse, you need to start compressions, and that wasn't done either.
And so are these things that you wanted to do?
It's what I would have done for anybody.
When you couldn't do that, how did that make you feel?
Totally distressed.
Were you frustrated?
Yes.
So, Mr. Pointer, after hearing that, should this case be a home run for the prosecution?
A grand slam. A grand slam. An outright victory.
And will it be?
The helplessness that she expressed with watching something unfold right in front of her, and the duty that she acknowledges that she had as a firefighter, and the one that the police officer should have been, that was duty bound to follow through with, which is take care of somebody in their custody, of which he ignored and violated, is the way Black America and any fair-minded citizen is also looking at those events unfold.
How about
Thankful.
Mr. Stark, do you want to weigh in there?
I would say this, that I wish the charges would have been, the charges don't reflect this crime. And so this bar is really low. That has to be said. This was to me out murder.
Let me
I
just
say that
reiterate.
unapologetic. This was murder.
I just want to reiterate
And
for
then
the audience that was second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. So please continue.
Yeah, and again, I am not an attorney, but when you see very cold, hands in pocket, knees on neck, what this witness talked about today was his full weight of 3 men on one person, and Chauvin's body just fully planted on his neck, and he didn't get up when the EMTs arrived, and it was almost like a murderous hit. It was almost as if we want to exact some blood on this guy, and we will not get off him until the EMTs arrive. And there was no sense of urgency, and I might have been in jail today. That would have been my brother.
Mr. Pointer, would you care to weigh in on those charges?
Yeah. I mean, this is low-hanging fruit for any other case with these circumstances other than a Black man and a police officer in America. If you change those roles, change those positions, once again, it would not even be up for debate. But because of America's legacy of discrimination, racism, and so on and so forth, this is now a close call when it really should not be. And I think the EMT's testimony today, that essentially she was appealing to the officer's humanity. And he was so intent, as Mr. Stark said, on exacting blood and his form of street justice, that it overrode any sense of decency, professionalism, and humanity that might have been in his heart.
Many people are saying that the justice system itself is on trial right now. What would you say?
Agreed. For many folks in this country, it's not a justice system, it's an injustice system. And the way in which Chauvin's casualness, cruelty, and confidence, his arrogance in doing what he did, looking people dead in the eye as he killed a man on that street, he never thought he would see the inside of a courtroom.
Mr.
And the
Starks?
only question to be begged is, how many other times has he treated people less than human while wearing the badge of the great state of Minnesota?
Mr. Starks, I want to give you a chance to weigh in on as well.
Well, of course. I mean, this did not happen in a vacuum. This does not happen to one man who happened to be caught on the camera, but it has happened for 400 years, in which you have the system has worked in such complicit ways, from the law enforcement to district attorney, and the inequities between public defenders and the people coming into that system, and this relationship, this casual relationship between law enforcement, district attorney, and judges, and then it doesn't end there. It goes into the correction system, and you're impugned to be guilty based on certain conscious and unconscious biases that you carry, and it's time to end this. It's time to end this system. It's time to really critically think about a world in which it's representative of all of its people. I can go on, but I'm going to defer. But it's really tiring. It's exhausting, really.
Yeah, and of course, we're just at the beginning, but I wanted to give you both a chance to tell me, what are you looking for as this trial continues? Why don't we start with you, Mr. Pointer?
Well, it is in the beginning. It's early. And so far, I think the prosecution is doing an excellent job of presenting their case, using science, using preciseness of a timeline, putting their best witnesses forward at their best foot. But, as in any trial, there are ups and downs, and it's going to be a roller coaster. And I presume that the defense has things that they're going to want to, talk about and examine on and put their witnesses in order to make an impact. So we're far from the end of this race here. Okay. So, we have to continue to stay vigilant, watch what's taking place, and, hope that justice is served. Unfortunately, many people know that justice is very elusive when it comes to cases like this. So, it's far from a slam dunk, far from a home run, despite how fair-minded people might be looking at this evidence. But this is a bellwether for where we stand right now as a country. Can we do the right thing when the bell is rung? Or do we look the other way and continue to let these atrocities take place?
And you, Mr. Pointer? Oh, sorry, Mr. Starks.
Well, I would see this as an opportunity for us to reflect on some of our most endeared institutions, and know that the road of social justice runs through a radical redesign of some of our most endeared institutions. This is but one. And we should look for the opportunity to build conversations across race, class, gender. We should look for opportunities to critically examine the law enforcement system and ask, are we over policing in Black and brown communities? And is justice blind? And let's have those critical and very hard and uncomfortable conversations now. And let's use this as an object lesson, because we can do this. We can do this. We're not in the greatest country for a reason. We can do this. And I think that together, if we have these uncomfortable conversations, we'll get through this.
We can do this. All right. I just want to say thank you both for joining us. Civil rights attorney Adante Pointer and Sam Starks, executive director of MLK 365. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
That's all for tonight, but the conversation on day 3 of the Derek Chauvin trial continues tomorrow. Good night.